Let's talk now about the third main feature, the main characteristic of the forager food supply, the one to which human beings are naturally adapted. When we looked at that savanna homeland of ours, it was a fairly low-fat environment. We kind of come to accept that kind of notion. But even so, fats would constitute something like 20–25% of the calories that people were consuming, which is quite a bit lower than the average Westerner, the average American, who are consuming something like 35% of calories from fat, and the Japanese, on the other hand, who only consume, at least in their traditional cuisine, something like 10% of calories from fat. So there we are, a moderate level of fatty acids. But the interesting point about it is this, is not the amount of fat, it is not even the classes of fat, as between monounsaturated, polyunsaturated, or saturated. It is the individual fatty acid profile which is interesting and which is of vital importance. Because the profile of the fatty acids back then in our savanna environment was of a particular kind, and it occurred not only in the plants, it occurred in the creatures that ate the plants, and it occurred in the creatures that ate the plants, including human beings. So, monounsaturated fats, the ones we think of as being good for us, were indeed quite common in our environment. For example, they're present in the brains that people were eating and in various other sources. So our bodies know how to handle the monounsaturated fats pretty well. Some saturated fats were there too. So not all saturated fats are bad. In particular, stearic acid is common then, and our body handles it very well. In fact, it converts it into monounsaturated fat. It converts it into what we might call olive oil. With difficulty, but nevertheless it handles it reasonably well. And we'll come on to some of the subtleties as to why some saturated fats, for example the fat in palm oil, the palmitic acid, is actually not such a problem as we might have originally thought. That is a separate issue. But palmitic acid in general, of an animal source, is a problem for the human body. It never encountered it in the savanna environment, it doesn't know how to handle it, and it creates problems. It's one of the reasons why palmitic acid and another one, myristic acid, which are both saturated fats, which are common in today's animal fats, are a problem for us. They are a factor in various kinds of cardiovascular disease. So we're fairly familiar with that, I won't labour it. The third thing is that there were certain kinds of polyunsaturated fats that were always there in the environment, in such a way that if we don't get them, we sicken and die. They are essential. Our bodies came to rely on them being there. And there were only two of them. And in the old days, we used to call them vitamin F1 and vitamin F2. And this kind of gives you the clue that you only needed small amounts to have very powerful effects, just like a vitamin. In fact, the body turns these fatty acids into powerful hormones called eicosanoids. And broadly speaking, what one set of hormones does, the other one undoes. So one might be increasing blood pressure, the other one decreasing blood pressure. One might be increasing blood clotting, one decreasing blood clotting. One increasing bone building, the other one decreasing bone building, and so on. They acted like a kind of tug-of-war team or like a seesaw. And back then in our savanna environment, these two fatty acids were, broadly speaking, in equal proportions, oscillating backwards and forwards like this, and the body sorted itself out just right. And what we've done today is that and it's happened just in my lifetime, what we've done today is to lock down that seesaw just on one side, such that we're overproducing one class of hormones. And this is creating many of the problems today. It's a factor in many of our medical problems today. This is what it looks like. So there we have it. That is the seesaw locked down by vitamin F2. It is the famous omega-6, omega-3 axis that we're looking at. Omega-3, omega-6 seesaw, if you like. And what is the consequence of this? The consequence of this is that these omega-6 oils, which are coming almost entirely from vegetable oils. Hey, vegetable oils are good, aren't they? Well, only up to a certain point. These vegetable oils are being converted into hormones like thromboxane, like prostaglandin series 2, like leukotrienes, which in their various kinds of ways are doing all kinds of mischief to us. They're increasing inflammation, and that inflammation is the source of many problems like arthritis and generalized inflammation throughout the body, undermining our health. It's increasing blood clotting, one of the reasons why we have abnormal blood clotting, increasing histamine production. Hey, all this is beginning to sound a little familiar. It is decreasing bone building. It is depressing the immune system, another way in which we're allowing cancers to flourish. It is increasing depression, increasing dementias. So one of the major problems in today's world is the big transfer that we made from consuming lard 50 years ago into consuming vegetable oils like corn oil, like peanut oil, like safflower oil, like sunflower oil, and many, many others. Because they are the omega-6 rich oils. And then on the other side of the seesaw, we do have these famous omega-3s, which are becoming flavor of the month almost. Now the manufacturers are even introducing omega-3 oils into various kinds of foods as a supplement. They are indeed fish oils, classic case, oily fish, the ones like the sardines, the mackerels, the salmons and so on are right for us. They're giving us the right kind of omega-3 oils that we need. There are one or two vegetable oils which do fit the pattern too, like canola oil, otherwise known as rapeseed oil, happens to fit the pattern. And of course, omega-3 rich eggs, where they come from hens which have been fed the kind of diet which chickens should be fed, and they also have a good balance of omega-3 to omega-6. And just in passing, I would say this, that chickens really should be running around a farmyard, and they would be pecking at all kinds of creatures. They would be eating little insects, they would be eating seeds, and they would be eating all kinds of herbs and foodstuffs, so even like parsley. They would have, those kinds of chickens would be producing the kinds of eggs that are right for us human beings too, and they'd be right for chickens. And today, of course, most of us can't get farmyard eggs like that. It's a great rarity, but if you can, hey, go and get it. Otherwise, you go to the supermarket, and in many countries, you can find supplies where they're not only omega-3 rich, but they're organic and they're free range and so on. And that's the next best thing. But the challenge in today's world is not so much to eat the omega-3s, you do need them, but we only need 1 gram a day of these, of each of these omega-6s and omega-3s. The challenge is to unload that side of the seesaw, to strip out that excess of omega-6 oil that's in the diet today. Go home, throw out the sunflower oil, throw out the peanut oil, and so forth. Finally, let me just mention there's a little arrow in the middle of the seesaw. Hey, that's the omega-9 oil, that's the olive oil. That's why olive oil is so, you might think it's good for us. Well, it's good simply because it's an innocent bystander. It's not doing any harm. In the next segment, we'll be talking about another factor of the human diet, which is important for us.
Everything Geoff Bond says in these videos and a whole lot more is to be found in his book, Deadly Harvest. Check it out at www.deadlyharvest.com.